So Sarah, reflecting on the UK experience of the senior managers regime, what were some of people's main concerns going into that?
I think at the very start people were concerned about what it would mean for them personally, and at the start in the UK there was a reverse burden of proof which caused significant unease within the industry. But even when that was removed, there was still concern about how would I as an individual senior manager be able to demonstrate reasonable steps. So that was one of the key concerns. And then there were concerns about the practicalities of how this would work at board level. And in particular, would you end up with a two-tier board, including those that were senior managers and those that weren't? And what we found in practice is that that hasn't happened. That actually the board has become more collaborative, challenging of each other in an appropriate way, but working together to demonstrate that people are acting reasonably.
So if we think about the implementation, what were some of the lessons learned in the UK? What might people do differently if they had their time again?
So key lessons learned, 4 lessons I would say. Firstly, don't underestimate the complexity of this. It sounds straightforward to identify your senior managers, allocate responsibilities to them and document that. But in practice, the complex nature of organisations, in particular matrix structures and difficult reporting lines, means that it took far longer to work through that than firms had anticipated. So that was the first lesson. Second lesson was that the governance arrangements that were already in place perhaps weren't as robust as people had thought they were. And so when firms started to get into the detail of the regime, they realised that they needed to update terms of reference, they needed to update reporting lines, they needed to update role profiles and job descriptions, and that took a lot of time. So that's something that could be started much earlier. Third lesson was there was a lot of emotion around this. This is about humans, it's about personal accountability, and so people found that difficult. And some firms didn't really engage at that level with their senior managers early enough and focused much more on the sort of regulatory compliance rather than what it meant for them as individuals. And so it took a long time to work through that. And then the third lesson was around change. So there was changes to the regime late on, and some banks in particular used that as an excuse not to get started straight away. And then secondly, there was change in organisations, which meant that changes had to be made to their senior managers or responsibilities late in the day. So if you take all of that together, I think the key learning from the UK was to start earlier than they did. They left it too late and therefore had to hurry things at the end, which meant as they went into the regime when it went live, they still hadn't done everything that they wanted to and are still trying to work through that.
And so how do you go about sizing that effort?
Really good question, and I think most of the UK banks would look back on it and say they didn't get it right at the start. So they focused initially on the legal aspects of the regime, and where we got involved was then trying to broaden that out to look at the people aspects, the cultural aspects, the governance aspects, and some of the operational aspects as well. And so the teams were then far broader, including compliance, HR, and some of the corporate affairs teams.